Introduction to Service Dog Training. Module Overview. This module will outline the types of assistance dogs, including appropriate terminology and definitions. Students will also learn about some relevant legal issues relevant to service dogs, therapy and visitation dogs, and emotional support animals. Learning Objectives. By the end of this module, students will 1. Assess the clarity of current assistant dog terminology, 2. Clarify types of assistant animals based on characteristics, and 3. Evaluate state and federal laws regarding public access and assistance animals. After completing this module, you will be required to read Ensminger Chapter 8 and Parenti et al. Voiceovers of the readings are also located on this YouTube channel, and you will have to complete reading quiz number 1. Types of assistance animals. There are two main categories of animals in society: assistant animals, or animals that provide some type of assistance to society, and companion animals, or animals that are kept primarily as companions. Assistance animals can be classified according to the assistive function. For an example, an animal that provides personal service or assistance for one person is often called a service dog. Examples of service dogs are guide dogs, mobility assistant dogs, and medical alert dogs. Animals that provide animal-assisted therapy are called therapy dogs. Notice the difference between therapy and visitation dogs. Therapy dogs are listed under the common labels or examples in the functional category visitation animals. The term therapy dog is commonly used to refer to dogs that are not actually providing a type of therapy but are simply visiting with people. Technically, this is incorrect, and the term therapy dog should be reserved for dogs that are providing assistance within the scope of therapy, including the oversight of a professional in the field and specific goals and uses of the dogs during the therapy. Mobility assistance dogs. As you saw in the Animals in Society chart, there are several different types of service animals. Mobility assistant dogs provide support to individuals with mobility impairments. These highly trained dogs perform tasks such as opening doors, retrieving and carrying items, and turning lights on and off. Hearing dogs assist individuals with hearing difficulties. Autism dogs are primarily used to prevent a child from eloping or running off. They do this by leashing the dogs to the child. While the main leash to control the dog is attached to an adult caregiver, the dog is then trained to lie down and stay on command if the child attempts to run away. Autism dogs have also been used to interrupt stereotypy, such as hand flapping or self-harm, that some individuals with autism struggle with. Seizure alert dogs are one of the several types of medical alert assistance dogs. Seizure alert dogs may alert its handler to an oncoming seizure so that the person can get to a safe area or lie down to prevent physical harm during the seizure. The dog may also be trained to respond to the seizures by lying on top of the person or getting help from another person. Guide dogs. Guide dogs are probably the most commonly recognized type of assistance animal. Guide dogs provide assistance to individuals with mobility impairments. Guide dogs are very highly trained and are even taught intelligent disobedience. This means that the dog must know when it is dangerous to obey the handler's command. For example, if the handler is commanding the dog to cross the street but the dog sees a car is coming, the dog must disobey the handler's request to prevent a dangerous situation. Psychiatric service dogs. Psychiatric service dogs are the newest type, and there is still a lot of confusion about what they do and whether or not they are considered service animals. These dogs provide psychiatric support, but more specifically, they must perform a task or tasks related to handler's disability in order to be considered a service dog, as defined by the federal law. Providing companionship or emotional support is not sufficient. Some tasks that a psychiatric service dog might provide include waking the handler up when the handler is having a nightmare, remind the handler to take medications, retrieving medications when needed, alerting and responding to panic attacks, standing behind the handler in public to prevent startle from approaching strangers, and entering a room before the handler to check for safety. Therapy or visitation dogs. According to the Parenti et al. Taxonomy discussed earlier, therapy dogs and visitation dogs do not fall into the same category. However, the terms are interchangeable in lay language. Often, when a dog is called a therapy dog, it is actually a visitation dog by definition. In this course, the terms may be used in casual discussion, but when the specific function of the animal is important, we will use the terms correctly. In general, these dogs fall under the same categories in legal terms, so it is easiest to discuss them together. Therapy/visitation dogs do not have any public access rights according to the federal government. Some states do have laws that allow therapy and visitation dogs some access to public places, such as hotels, when they are necessary for the dogs to perform its duties. Typically, therapy and visitation dogs are highly trained pets and go into nursing homes and hospitals, but they must be approved to enter these places. Unlike service dogs, which generally have legally protected access to most public places with no prior approval needed. Emotional support animals. Emotional support animals, or ESAs, are also not provided public access by federal law. However, ESAs do have some legal protections in housing and transportation. For example, ESAs are permitted access to housing in airplanes. There is no national certification for an ESA that is required legally. ESA handlers may be asked to provide a letter from a doctor or other respected member of society stating that the handler has a need for the ESA before access is permitted. A need is typically a disability that impacts the handler's ability to function in a daily life. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. The ADA is a federal mandate that provides public access to individuals with disabilities and their service dogs. Note that the dog itself is not protected. It is the individual with the disability and their service dog. Within the mandate, the definition of public access is more clearly defined and excludes several places such as churches, privately owned homes, sterile environments, so tattoo parlors and surgical areas, and federally owned property. The Veterans Administration is exempt from the ADA law. Service animal is also defined for the purpose of ADA law as any guide dog, signal dog, or other animal individually trained to provide assistance to an individual with a disability. If they meet this definition, animals are considered service animals under the ADA, regardless of whether they have been licensed or certified by a state or local government. ADA public access. In sum, the ADA is a legal mandate that protects individuals with disabilities and their service dogs by allowing them access to most public locations. Different areas of law in each state has different mandates, but none may be more restrictive than the ADA. What about service animals and training? Public access for service dogs in training is not mentioned in ADA. However, most state laws have a clause regarding their rights to public locations. In West Virginia, service dogs in training and their trainers are afforded the same rights as individuals with disabilities and their service dogs. Remember, though, that laws within housing and transportation are different. The ADA does not protect service dogs in training when it comes to housing and transportation. The laws here are very murky and difficult to interpret. ADA public access refusals. Public entities are protected under the ADA. Public entities are permitted legally to refuse access to a person and their service dog if the animal is not under the control of the handler or the animal is not housebroken. The public entity is allowed to ask the following questions to determine the legitimacy of a service dog. 1. Is the animal required because of a disability? And 2. What work or tasks has the animal been trained to perform? If the service dog is legitimate, the public entity must allow access to the individual with his or her service dog, and they cannot charge extra for the presence of the animal.